know. Anyway, so the next speaker is going to speak about Brexit, and his name is David Furness.
Right. I'm going to talk about Brexit because the EU withdrawal bill is going through at the moment, and in a recent opinion poll, Brexit is the #1 concern of most Britons. The second is the National Health Service, the third is immigration. So it's very important. Now, the mainstream media, MSM, they're saying about that opinion poll, they're saying most people want a soft Brexit, not a hard Brexit. Well, I would say the opposite.
Yeah, we want out.
Yeah. Now, what does a soft Brexit actually mean? Well, it's basically membership of the EU by the back door. It's free movement of people in capital. It's membership of the customs union and membership of the single market. And that's exactly what the European Union stands for. So it's soft Brexit. When you hear that, it's EU membership in everything but name. So I think those who support a soft Brexit are obstructing the will of the people.
Yes.
Now, what's a hard Brexit? Well, it's the opposite of soft Brexit. It's what people voted for. Out of the single market, out of the customs union, and no free movement. Those who want that, true Brexit, I call hard Brexit a true Brexit. Those who want it are being demonised in the press. Now, The Guardian, left-wing rag, their definition of a hard Brexit is a Brexit without any agreement or trade, or Brexit without access to the single market. Now that's a lie. Because every country that trades with the EU has access to the single market. USA has access to the single market. India, China, Afghanistan, Vietnam, every country has access, and they've told a lie about that. Now, if we don't come up with an agreement, it's called a no-deal Brexit. It goes through WTO rules, World Trade Organization rules. Most of the world trade with the EU under those rules. But the no-deal Brexit, there's a lot of scaremongering about it. This is from the BBC, just looking at it for a few minutes. BBC have called a no-deal, they're saying no-deal chaos. Another headline, the UK could crash out of the EU with no deal. Notice the emotive language. Crashing and chaos. They also used another headline, the cliff edge of a no-deal Brexit. Well, this is typical scaremongering. Take the Independent, another left-wing rag. They have a screaming headline, most Brits now think Brexit was a mistake. Now, you'd think that was a result of some opinion poll, but it wasn't. It was a quote from the European Parliament President Antonio Tajani. But the way they portrayed it, like, oh, if it's true, that's not fact, it's just an opinion. Here's another one, Brexit could still be stopped. Who said that? Was it the British Parliament? No, that was a direct quote from Donald Tusk, President of the European Council. So I think that's a bit biased. Another screaming headlines I've seen recently, food prices will increase after Brexit. Well, some economists think it will actually fall. The reason why imported food is expensive because the European Union puts a tariff on it. So it could actually fall. Here's another one. Working families will be £500 worse off after Brexit. Well, that's not a fact, that's someone's opinion. Now, according to a group called Economists for Free Trade, Britain could win for a £135 billion windfall over 5 years because of increased trade and competition. So they're presenting one side of the argument. Because what they really want is a soft Brexit. They hate it. For, I think it's the first time in living memory, could be the first time in history, a referendum hasn't gone their way. We had the referendum in the 70s about, shall we remain part of the thing. They liked the result of that. We had this stupid referendum about the alternative voting system. That went the way they want, but this result didn't go the way they want. The ruling elite didn't like it, the press didn't like it, the mainstream media, the political elite, they didn't like it. So they're doing everything in their power, misinformations. Let's not forget that we'll save £9 billion a year. I know there's some argument about we pay and then get a rebate. Actually, that rebate, the European Union decides where to spend it, we don't. But we spend a minimum of £9 billion a year. We'll get that back. Now, after... Straight after the Brexit vote, we got reports saying hate crime has increased after Brexit. And I was asked by a reporter from the Financial Times, he said, "What do you hate crime has increased, hasn't it?" I said, "Well, no, correlation does not mean causation." And then it's now possible to report a hate crime. You can go online. In the old days, you had to go to the police station, sign something. You can do it online without even giving your name, address, your contact details, your telephone number, or your email. And they say, if you don't leave your details, we'll find it more difficult. So they have to report it. They say, we have to report it and log it. So what people were doing to demonise those who voted to leave, they could just phone up, say, "Oh, I heard some racial slur," or someone shouted something, they record it. And that's why there's been an increase in hate crimes reported. There hasn't been an increase in actual prosecutions. It's just been reported. So bear that in mind when you hear that one. So it's all about demonising those who voted to leave. Now, they're getting so desperate, the mainstream media is absolutely desperate to stop this, that they're now blaming the Russians for the referendum result. That's right. So the reason why everyone here and I voted to leave is because of the Russian brainwashing. Yes. They tried it with Donald Trump, and it's load of nonsense. Now the EU withdrawal bill, that's going through, it's now in committee stage. That means the MPs will try their utmost to change it, the wording and things like that. It's basically about repealing the legislation and making sure EU law no longer applies to Britain. It's actually repealing the 1972 Communities Act. Now, one thing that's caused a lot of fuss is Theresa May wants to put in an exit date, 11 p.m., 29th of March 2019. Because business leaders kept saying they want certainty. We must have certainty, so she put it in, and that's caused absolute uproar. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, and some Tory rebels, they're furious about it. Now, these rebels are saying all we want is closer economic ties with the European Union. Basically, EU membership by the back door. That's what they're saying. And they're threatening to vote with the opposition next month to defeat the EU withdrawal bill, to stop it. They've also said if they don't get their own way, they will join with the opposition in a vote of no confidence to bring the government down. Now that means they could be responsible for installing the most extreme left-wing government in British history, and they're prepared to do it. Now if Labour get back into power, let's say she was forced out and they have another election, it's my opinion that they will stop Brexit going through.
Yeah, they will.
Because they've indicated this already. They said they're open to the idea of the European Court of Justice having jurisdiction over Britain.
Forever.
Yep.
Dave,
They
what I
broke
can't
the law in the
understand is
first
why
place
wasn't this
without
given to an
need to.
independent body instead of given to the government that was going to oppose it in the first place anyway?
I don't know.
It's crazy.
They've also, another thing that's caused tremendous opposition, she wants to say, take it or leave it. She said you want to negotiate a deal, and the MPs kept saying, we want to vote on it. So she said, okay, you vote on it. If we don't like it, then we default to World Trade Organization rules. And they hate this, because they want to talk it down. They want to keep what their plan is to eventually get what they want. They want Theresa May to come up, oh, this is what we've done. They'll vote it down, go back, vote it again. They'll vote against it, and they'll keep doing it. I think it's called winding down the clock, is it, in football, where the team is 1-0 up, or they're up, and they want to hold the ball up, so they go slower. They're in the corner, and they're doing this, you've seen it. That's what they're hoping to do, or cause enough concern that there'll be a vote of no confidence. Or run it for 5 years until the next general election. That's how bad they are.
Kenneth Clark.
Yep. There's also a deal to essentially free movement of people by allowing the EU workers here to stay. Now, what are we talking about here? Well, it's estimated there are 3.6 million EU citizens in this country. About 2.4 million are actually working. That means 1.2 million are not. Maybe they're retired, I don't know. But we do know that EU citizens are far more likely to claim benefits than the indigenous population. Now, some people concentrate only on out-of-work benefits, but they do claim in-work benefits. Did you know that we subsidise greedy employers by giving working tax credits to EU workers? We also give them income support, and in many cases, housing benefit. If you take all that into account, they're far more likely to claim benefits. So I said 2.4 million working estimated in EU. This is all estimated. We don't know for sure. They don't seem to know who's coming in or who's coming out of the country. They estimate there are 1.2 million people born in the UK living in the EU, but of that, 400,000 are pensioners, mainly in Spain. So that means 800,000 UK people are working in the EU, as opposed to 2.4 million working here. And they say, oh, we have to protect those people. I'm not convinced by that.
Nor am I.
They let it slip because
For the votes.
one of the reasons why the votes, because there are local elections next year,
Exactly.
and they're allowed to vote in those elections, especially in London, and they want to make some inroads on that.
Exactly.
Now, they may say they have to guarantee the rights of EU citizens because of the Geneva Convention of the Law on Treaties 1969. Now, this is a convention, it's not law. They might come up and say, we signed up to this. So that treaty says, withdrawal from a treaty releases the party from any future obligations. However, it says that any obligations or rights under it before withdrawal must be respected. So they're saying, well, it's unfair, they were brought here and we let them here, so it's unfair. I'll tell you what was unfair.
We were never consulted.
We voted in the 70s, well, not everyone, but people who voted in the 70s referendum, they were assured that it would never be a political union. And of course it was, they were lied to. Now that's unfair. So they may rely on that convention, but there's a UN mandate, which we signed up to, on the rights of indigenous peoples. It's been mentioned earlier. It states that any influx of foreigners that has the effect of adversely affecting the influence or the culture or the population may be guilty of ethnocide. And that means ethnocide is the deliberate and systematic destruction in whole or part of an ethnic group. Why don't they adhere to that convention? No, they don't. They've ignored it, and the last Labour government. So they only adhere to conventions or treaties that they want. If there's something which opposes them, they just ignore it. Now, the British National Party believes, this is a core belief, we believe that every ethnic group has a right to exist. But it's impossible for them to have much of a future if they are overwhelmed by other ethnic groups. Now, there's one reason why Labour loves the European Union of Socialist Republics. It's because of the EU's mindset on this matter. Jean-Claude Juncker, everyone's favourite, he's the European Commission President. He said, and I quote, "Borders are the worst ever invention made by politicians." Now that sums up the EU, what they're all about. Now it's no coincidence that Labour, they love the Marxist slogan, "No nations, no borders." They love it. Because Karl Marx, just to recap, he believed that capitalism, once it's abolished, there'll be no nations. That's what he thought. But he was wrong. He didn't see the emergence of the middle class, amongst other things, and he underestimated, Marxists, they underestimated the real attachment that the proletariat, the workers, have to their country, especially in times of war, in times of stress. They thought their attachment, the proletariat, to use his phrase, have a real attachment more than the attachment to the world-class struggle that's going on. So many people said to me, well, Corbyn, really he belongs in the 70s. I said, yes, I agree, the 1870s. Now, you've heard about the no-deal Brexit. As I've explained, it defaults to World Trade Organization rules. Now, they're making it sound as if it's terrible. Most of the world that trades with the EU, they operate by these rules, and they've done very well. India has increased their trade with the EU using those rules. China, there's no reason why we can't. So what are the benefits? Well, the House of Lords made a report. If we default, if we have no deal, we won't have to pay a divorce settlement. I know the EU are demanding, I've heard figures from 20 billion up to 100 billion.
Yeah.
They're making it happen,
they want to make it more difficult for any other country. They want to make it as difficult as possible. So they quote these figures, but the House of Lords report, they took legal advice, they said, we won't have to pay a divorce settlement.
We shouldn't pay one anyway.
Yeah. EU citizens, if we had no deal, they will have no right to stay here. Now, what happens to trade? We hear a lot of, they're concentrating on nothing about ethnicity or freedom. They concentrate on trade. Manufactured goods is estimated could rise between 2 and 3%. Well, that's ignoring the effect of removing barriers from non-EU. They'll be able to sell their goods much cheaper here. Cars, they said it could go up by as much as 10%. So if you're thinking of spending £50,000 on a BMW or a Mercedes, you could pay 55,000 instead of 50,000.
Oh, blimey.
So if you're willing to spend £50,000 on a BMW, are you going to really be bothered by an extra 5,000? If you are, maybe you shouldn't spend that amount of money on a car. And it's also, the actual cars could decrease because, don't forget, they drive on the wrong side of the road over there. So they have to sell right-hand drive cars here. There'll be a competition. Japan, they drive on the same side of the road as we do. We put a tariff on their cars, 10%. So if we didn't have that, there'd be lots of competition. They'd be able to sell Japanese cars. So in fact, they'd be so desperate, Europeans and Germans, to sell their cars, the price could come down. Agricultural goods, they said, could go up 20 to 40%. Again, ignoring the facts from Europe. They're ignoring the fact that our food is much more expensive than it should be for imported food because we put a tariff on it, those not in the EU. That's why we need to save our green belt and farmland.
The fisheries bill.
And we're losing our green land every single day. I'm not sure of the figures, but it's every single day we're losing, every week.
Brown land as well.
Yep, that's why we need to protect it. And they say, oh, financial services, they'll lose their passporting rights. British firms, but European firms will also lose their passporting rights. Someone said to me, well, these city traders earning £1 million a year, they could have their income cut. And they may lose 10%, 20%. Some of them could be made redundant. I said, oh, that's a shame, isn't it? They say our regulatory agencies, we'll have to set up our own. I said, well, yeah, okay, do it. That'll create jobs. And they're saying scaremongering stories. The moment we leave, they said planes will be grounded. We won't be able to take off. It's a nonsense.
Yeah,
Set up our own regulatory agencies.
Like we had
It's
before.
employment.
Like we had before.
Well, we had before, yeah. Now this, what greedy employees here, they've been subsidised by the taxpayer. If they didn't have the opportunity of employing foreign workers, they'd be desperate for workers, and therefore they'll have to raise the money up.
Yeah.
So it's a chance for the working
Right.
class to
Right.
increase their wages.
Yeah.
So that's the one benefit of getting out. Just to remind people of some of the reasons why we voted to leave. Well, the first one is not the Russians. We want our own sovereignty, make our own laws. There's the cost, I've mentioned before, at least 9 billion. There's jobs. We know that importing EU workers has cut the pay of many people, especially lower down the income scale. Lorry drivers are complaining. They load up with diesel and petrol in Dover. They can undercut people here. I've seen it myself. And I've seen it in expensive areas. You've got multi-million-pound houses being renovated by Eastern European workers. And they're getting paid cash in hand. I've seen it. Big wad of notes they're paying out. So the people who are paying for this, they must have a bit of money, so they're going for the cheapest option. Now, I was in Kensington and Chelsea. I was in someone's garden and I heard this cracking sound. And it was coming from the house opposite, in the next street. Now, I know recently they had a roof garden fixed, something with the roof, Polish workers, Eastern European, and I heard it crack, and then the whole thing started sliding off. It's big chunks of masonry was crashing into the ground. It was down to shoddy workmanship. Now, how was that reported in the local press? Well, they said this could be an unexploded World War II bomb. It's nonsense, because all the windows were still there. I've heard a bomb go off, but this was shoddy workmanship. And who did they get to replace this roof that fell off? More Eastern European. So I didn't know whether to laugh or no one got killed anyway. But the other reason, the euro. Look at what happened to Greece. They adopted the euro. It's been a disaster. They were encouraged to give up their own currency, and by that, they've lost control of their currency. They're not in control, the European bankers. They were warned, the Greek government was warned. There was a letter signed by 200 economics professors saying this is a disaster, this is going to be a disaster, we're going to end up in debt. But the politicians said no, we're going ahead. And look what happened now.
Hello, darling.
There was also I remember at the time, economists were urging, and some politicians were urging the UK to give up the pound and join the euro. And they said at the time, we must abandon the pound and join the glorious euro because it's a stable currency and it will bring jobs and but thank God we didn't. Another reason is the threat of Turkey joining the EU. Now, we've got 70 million Muslims. If they join, and if we stay in, we have the right to live and work here. Now, the politicians, they've been denying it, but they're lying. David Cameron last year, he said, don't worry about Turkey joining the EU, they won't be able to join until the year 3000. That's 883 years' time. That's what he actually said. I'm not making it up. You must think we're stupid. And now you'll see reports in the thing, no, Turkey had no intention of ever joining. No, it's all rubbish. But they've been making plans for 20 years. So this is just another reason, because of broken promises by politicians. You can't trust them. The ones in Europe as well, stretching all the way back to Margaret Thatcher. Remember, the 70s, I think, she said, immigration, don't worry, we're going to sort it out. Some people thought, oh, good. But they didn't. Mad Merkel, Germany. A couple of years ago, she said, multiculturalism doesn't work. It's failed.
Yeah.
People thought, oh, it's good for her for admitting it. Years later, she let in 1 million refugees. Cameron, he also said, yes, I agree, immigration, it doesn't work. And in the 2010 election, he said, when we get into power, Labour's disgraceful, we're going to cut it drastically. And what actually happened? It increased. Sadiq Khan, the Muslim mayor of London. Now, I stood in that election, I was campaigning. This woman said to me, I'm going to vote Labour. I said, why? Well, Sadiq Khan promised that he would build 50,000 houses a year. I said, do you actually believe that? She said, yes, because he grew up in a council house. He knows what it's like to be poor. I said, but he's not going to do it. She said, yes, he is. And when he went on TV, he was asked, where are you getting the money? He said, we've got plans. And that's what he kept saying. Well, where are you getting the money? We've got plans, don't worry. 50,000 a year, and it's been about 18 months, so by now he should have built 75,000. I've got the figure here of how many he's actually built. None. That's what he said. He also said, I mean, just before the mayoral election, he said that there were lots of tube strikes. They were going on strike. He said, if I'm elected, there will be no more tube strikes. And they said, you sure? He said, yes, no more tube strike if I'm elected. Weeks later, tube strike happened. It's not just in Britain. 24 years ago, somebody by the name of Charles Pasqua, he was the immigration minister for France. Even then, people were saying, we're fed up with this immigration. Now, he promised. He said, France will close its borders and would become a zero immigration country. He also said, France plans to do something about illegal immigrants. He said, when we send them back by the plane loads, the boat loads and train loads, the world will get the message. He promised that to the electors. Did they do it? No, of course not. They always make these promises around election time, and people fall for it. So, when they say Turkey will never join the EU, I don't believe it. Neither should anyone else. Now, I feel that the mood is changing in Europe. You've got the AfD in Germany, Action for Deutschland.
Alternative for Deutschland.
Sorry?
Alternative for Deutschland.
Oh, sorry. Alternative for Deutschland. Well, that's right. It went from 0 to 90 seats in the Bundestag. And
Bundesstaat.
Anyway, in the German parliament. That's caused shockwaves. It's because the people are fed up with Islamisation and immigration. In Hungary, they're resisting refugees, and Merkel's saying to them, you must accept all these refugees. If you don't, we're going to hit you with a massive fine. They say, we won't pay it. So there's got a lot of trouble in future. Austria, the People's Party and the Freedom Party, they're working together to form a government coalition. They're anti-immigration, anti-Islamisation. And the good news, Merkel is under threat. She failed, I think it was a couple of days ago, to form a working coalition. So we could see another election. There's a chance for the alternative for Deutschland. Their votes. So the mood is changing, I feel it, and we can be part of that in Britain. Here's a final word on Brexit. Ultimately, Brexit is not just about trade deals. It's about sovereignty, identity and freedom. Thank you very much.